Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm here to discuss a number of topics that are found in the book by spiritual author Joanna DeAngelis, Adolescence in Life. If you have not read it before, I appreciate you watching this video and I welcome you to also read the book. Um, the small book is an invitation to all parents and educators. As a parent, as a Christian spiritist, I find this to be a book containing urgent and unavoidable discussions. So it behooves us to understand, all of us, our roles, our responsibilities as parents, educators, citizens of this planet, so we can best understand and engage this new generation. As the prior book, most of them by John DeAngelis contain a range from 20 to 30 chapters. This one is right smack in the middle. It has 25 chapters and it contains quite a wide range of themes, ranging from teenage sexuality, their sense of identity, identity crisis, and it goes all the way to suicide. So, our goal today is to leverage this book to confront the challenges parents experience while raising their young. Are you ready? So let's go ahead and get started here. And those are the five chapters, I'm sorry, chapters 6 to 10 that we're going to just brush through in the next hour or so. So let's go ahead and get started. um, when we talk about possibilities and limits, right? How do adolescents handle those that time in their lives? And I come to you to say, as I reach my current and yes, old age, I have a sense of right or wrong, how much easier everything seemed to be during my own adolescent years. Physically and emotionally, perhaps I was scared to fly, right? But I was ready for it. I felt that I had what it took to just take flight. So Jonah DeAngelis reminds us of he- I call bubbly, right? There's a bubbly enthusiasm when we and our teenagers at the time feel happy. So, of course, with this happiness, this bubbly, it's sense of eruption that comes with happiness and enthusiasm and impulsive. The other side of it is heaviness, pessimism, when things don't go right. And we, as our teenagers, may become depressed. So the two sides, the polar sides of this very, very strong type of emotions that are elicited during our teenage years, especially. But, if you stop about it and you say, yes, yes, I felt all of those. I felt that my life would end when a friend bullied me or another one ghosted me, so on and so forth. But we pause to think, are those hyperbolic emotions real? Reality, as we mature, is neither the enchanted, blissful world, right, of castles and princes and fairy tales. No, but on one hand, they're not that, but they're not an experience of having to face an abyss once we have a not so good experience. So I'd like to pause to just read a few words by Joanna when she talks about this topic. She says, and I find quite beautiful, life is an ensemble of possibilities waiting to be experienced. Life is an ensemble of possibilities waiting to be experienced, so that the spirit can grow both morally and intellectually. So she continues, the way people choose to use those opportunities and not the opportunity themselves is what will define their happy or unhappy outcome. Wow. a lot a lot to unpack here, right? It makes me really pause and want to reflect upon this. It's not the what, it's not how my life may seem maybe privileged or the opposite of it as compared to other people. It's not what the possibilities are, but how I live, how I use, how I experience those opportunities that life give to me, life provides to me. So for the teenager who is in that swing, right, from blissful experience to tragedy awaiting to happen, right? This subject is important for all of us to understand. There are indeed many roads to travel, and we have to look for it while the life itself is this array of possibilities, right? It is up to us to choose how to travel. And many of those chosen paths will require us to work at it, right? It may require us to get a sense of sacrifice or commitment or dedication before we get to the end of the road, before we achieve a certain goal. And we can ask ourselves, let's think about it. How am I choose to use, to leverage, to enhance the opportunities given to me? And I can start very specific to me, to my experience in life, my body. What is it? How is it? How do I honor? How do I treat this body? How about my, say, social experiences? How do I show up? How do I treasure and react to those in my social circle? What about my family life? Do I honor my father, my mother, my children, my siblings, my extended biological family, my extended spiritual family, those that have a spiritual connection with me? How do I treat them? What about, say, my access to education? Do I take it for granted or do I really cherish it? What about, in my case, right? I'm no longer in school, but what about my professional journey? Do I treat it as a given to me? I'm entitled, or do I? And I'm missing better words, but to me it comes, how do I honor this path taken? What about my spiritual path? How do I behave from a spiritual perspective? Overall, simply put, for the teenagers in our lives, or to ourselves as maybe a little bit more mature teenager, or you who may be a teenager, listen to this video. How much am I willing to invest in my own future beyond body, interaction, family life, education, etc., etc.? How am I willing to commit to a future that I can give color to, right? So, changing a little bit of subjects here, I want us to bring a sense of a subject that Joanna is famously identified with. So, as we know, Joanna DeAngelis is a spiritual author, and we can talk about later on her lives. But she was one of the contributors. She was identified, even though she didn't identify herself, during the publication of the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. But she contributed, famously so, to a passage called Patience. It is part of the chapter 9 and is the item 7. And she goes on to talks about how in some cases pain is a blessing, right? And when we suffer through it allows us to grow, to move away, right? And she calls upon all of us to be patient with life, to be patient with all there is perhaps difficult. And she asks us, she ends her entire discussion on patience with giving us a call to action, or an invitation, if you will, to become patient with courage. Anyway, so she talks about it in the book, in this chapter specifically. She reminds us again that yes, we're talking about adolescence, and yes, patience is not a forte, right? We are often, very often, impulsive. We are just hungry for results. And yet she says, my dear, and I can see her in my mind's eye, or Joanna D'Angelis telling me, my dear, be patient. Life follows its own timetable. It's not upon us to say now versus then. Life has its own timetable. And so I go back to when I was a teenager, that teenager, just scared to death, but ready to fly. Please note that I could not, metaphorically speaking, fly until my feathers were ready for me to do so. So some of the pearls of wisdom she brings in intertwined with the idea of patience is patience, number one, right? Patience counters frustrations. All of those frustrations when we must wait for something else before we can act upon something. She says also that one very important thing for us to believe, to understand, is that accepting what we cannot control, um, right? Those are the things that will make us stronger and better. It's just to be resigned to. We cannot control the outcomes of many, many things, right? In accepting that will alleviate the pain when we are facing with some situations. Third, as I drink a little bit of my cup of coffee, um, she says, it's not enough to dream. We need to persevere. We need to actually execute those dreams into a reality. So, in conclusion for this discussion, right, we may need to learn to patiently wait for the right moment to even begin something. She tells us that all that is expected from us, which is quite beautiful in my opinion, all that is expected from us is just do your best. And I have to say, I go back to presenting myself as an old person as I speak about adolescence, and I think I've lived enough years to be able to say so, right? Knowing that you've done your best will be the one thing that will set you free for many times when you feel guilty. Oh, I could have. No, you've done your best. She also means in terms of patience, right? So three things that we have to patiently wait for the right moment. We have to understand that the best that we can do, the most that is expected from us, is to do all that we can do. But the third and final item is the fact that we should not take on more than we can handle. And yes, I know it's easier said than done. I'm one of those people that often sees myself like, oh, did I do more? Did I select to do more than I can actually um, handle at this point? So she gives that sense of that invitation, that call to action to all of us, but most important, all of us who are living an adolescent experience. So she says, think about your body. It's just an example. Your body has a limit. And as such, we should not push ourselves to do what we are not able to do yet. And just a few things that comes to my mind when I read that is just pushing the boundaries of our bodies by not sleeping enough, right? Or in some cases, I will not eat enough, or oh, the other side of it, I will party too much, or I will be offered and will allow myself to experiment too much, right? And this is important for us to know because on one hand, we know our life is to be lived. Yes, yes, yes. Our lives is to be lived, but we are here living this life, this materialized to learn those very valuable lessons that life will offer to us. Why am I saying that? Well, it's because we really learn most from our trial and error, right? We may read in a book and say, "Hey, do this," and we'll do it, but we don't inherently learn. Or what I mean by that, we don't learn for life, but by actually trying and making mistakes and trying again, we really learn. And so, with that prescription to live life and learn and hence fail, right? We must be prepared, and we often are not, to try to fail when trying and to accept that we are not perfect, but we are perfectible. That's probably my word created just now. Spirits, right? We are spirits in an evolutionary path that by falling, quote unquote, falling and making mistakes, but trying, getting up and trying again, we become closer and closer to that perfect or pure spirit. So um, we must take risks, right? We must try. And by taking risks to fulfill a dream, an aspiration of sort, we will be able to get closer to its fulfillment, to its execution. And the thought that comes to my mind is really that young toddler who without any preparation, really it's just that impulse to grow, does not stop trying to walk after he or she falls. And I say, yes, this is a message for me and for you. Let's not be afraid. And some people even say, let's fail and fail fast, right? It is with that that I say life's possibilities are endless, and our only limitations are our own lack of readiness. So let's plan, let's follow through, and let's achieve our own greatness, right? So as we move to the next area of discussion, love it because it's about love and passion. And yes, we're shifting a little bit. the discussion here, because love and passion's all about hormonal exuberance. Yes, I said it. Love and passion is really a reflection of all that goes. And I see in myself a soup of sorts of all sorts of hormones. And let's think about it. We have so much going on at this time. We have our very emotional, the swing, right? Everything is the highest level of response. We have a very impulsive nature. We are ready to do before we are ready to go. And yes, all the hormones kicking in and moving us to be both. On the other hand, we lack, and I'm thinking in terms of material life, but let's zoom in into adolescence here. We don't have enough discipline, and it's really a reflection of not knowing how much it takes to do what we want to do when we have never done it. Makes sense, right? It doesn't make sense in words, but we just don't have the experience to say, I need to do this way and this many times to get to this result. We don't have that knowledge. We don't have the discipline either. And finally, we really lack, we have an absence of that, what I call the mental order, emotional order, that organizational structure to give us a sense of this is how it should be. And oftentimes I think when I say this is that it's like an emotional whirlwind, making it really, really hard for us to distinguish between pleasure, fulfillment, sexual ecstasy, yes, I said it, and peace and joy and harmony, right? It's just a lot of things going on. And it's hard for us to just stop and say, yes, this is peace, this is joy, this is pleasure, this is fulfillment, and just the sexual ecstasy that is part of this experience as teenagers. So think about it. This is the time in our lives when we may indeed experience devastating or irresponsible passions. If I am true here, very honest here, I say I myself escaped from what could have been catastrophic situations. And those situations could have left deep psychological scars in me to the rest of my life. I didn't. So we say, why is that? Why are we so vulnerable? And it is because everything is happening, right? Inside us, our bodies, physically, psychological, emotionally. And we're in this state of wanting to just really motivated by new desires, new interest, curiosity. And one small word, right, that frames this time quite well, which is libido. Uh, our libido awakened at this time of our life is very, very powerful, and that may overtake all of our relationships at home, with friends, with everything. So let's think about it, and forgive me for not using perhaps the best words for today, 2022. But when a new crush comes to our lives, and that person that we just are devastatingly in love with, may not respond, may not react. How could it be? How devastating it is for us when we don't actually have that person be full, express all that we are feeling back to us. So interesting enough, Joanna tells us, well, think about it. Yes, it's part of every teenager life, being a victim of our own libido and developing immense crushes, and there's some things that we could do with it, shall we? And as usually, it comes in three. So number one, creativity, right? That creative energy is actually a very sexual energy, if you will. And we can use that creative, artistic energy to create. And we can also use, which is quite a raw energy, for researching, for studying, for working, for whatever it is that you want to do. It stems from the same, and it mostly from our creativity. And what am I talking about? Oh, music, dancing, singing, poetry, you name it. It's all very much a very creative energy that we can utilize when we cannot control our libido. The other one that she says is just leverage all those hormones that are really coming to our bodies and sometimes playing havoc to us with too much, right? There are physical, there are psychological aspects to the hormones coming to our bodies. So use it and abuse it. Where sports, activities, exerting ourselves, go to, I don't know, walks in nature, immerse yourself in all that is active, physically active. And finally, she says one other thing is activism, which is something that I find quite enchanting myself. Be an activist in your society, in your community, whatever that may be. You could say, I'm an activist for peace, for climate change, for um, animal, against animal cruelty, for a cleaner planet. I don't know, but engage. And that in itself will use all that you have and will in turn transform the planet. But back to the libido. Libido is indeed an added complexity to the life of a teenager. But the good news is it is a normal part of life. What we must think about it is part of who we are, but we have to think the context in which we live. We should be alert to the fact that we live in a highly interconnected digital age that is, statistics prove to us, that is pushing us teenagers to a very premature emergence of our libido, right? Why is that? Well, visual stimulation, audio stimulation, everything is playing because, as I mentioned before, it is such a powerful impulse to act that advertisers, for example, found that the best way to sell is to awaken, to stimulate the libido that exists in all of us. So due to those very strong stimulations, or say conversations at all about sex, it just focus on sex. Our own curiosity, our own impulsive behavior, and that overstimulation by all, including social media, may lead us to a a sense, a set of false needs. And I'm speaking here sexually speaking, right? Speaking about our sexual needs, that we may just want to be alert. Is this my overstimulated brain, or is it me and my own needs? And I say that I hear is a little bit of a joke, so my apologies if I offend anyone. But you're watching TV and you just had dinner, and there comes this amazing, beautifully crafted advertisement for, I will say, pizza, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go eat pizza. Very similar. It's just a stimulation to lead to something that you may not really need. But anyways, let's talk about love, right? Let's talk about because we talked a lot about passion, but let's talk a little bit about love, and consider what love is in this age group. And it's very interesting because when we love as a teenager, we somehow translate the emotion, the feeling of loving, erotic love, the other, as something that equals to possessive, right? A possession, ownership. So that possessive feeling, I think, is important for us to be aware, because you may feel like you own the other, but the other side of the cone is if the other, quote unquote, owns you, right? If you're owned by your new loved one, be aware that you may be led to be submitted to his or her will that may not meet your own. So it's self-awareness is important when we think about and I'm going to call immature because we're very young in age, and we somehow translate in our archive of emotions, love with possession. So what to do? What to do with that, right? If it happens to so many, just be aware. Be aware that this may happen, and that you really are not required to submit to something that does not feel right. It also means that all of us need to be aware we should not, as much as we'd like to, impose, that's again the flip side of this, impose our personality to the other. What we want the other to do may not be the best for that other people, even though you love that person, right? And as difficult if as all of this means, real love, I smile here big because, when we think about love, love is the fulfillment of our humanity, our divinity in our lives. But real love is really an expression of strength, of character, and yes, maturity. Maturity, because real love will demonstrate responsible choices, right? An example of that is being tender. Tenderness never imposes. I'm going to be tender with you, but you must do that. No, it doesn't work like that. So it's important to understand that if real love is rare to be found in our adolescent years, they're not impossible, right? And some of us do fall in love in that real love, and they are indeed capable of loving deeply. Who are those? Well, experienced spirits incarnating again, and they usually demonstrate the evidence. They show evidence of their maturity by a strong sense of understanding, a strong sense of empathy and feeling for the other. So the flip side of immature real love, and I'm gonna make you upset here, but it's just an example, and it's a fictional example at that, right? An example of that immature love is, well, Romeo and Juliet. Think about it is fictional. It's a fictional account of love, but it ends in tragedy. Why? Well, immaturity, impulsive behaviors, and finally, suicide, right? So, as we read that story, if you have not read or watched the movies, plural, it's important to see because it's quite rich from a storytelling perspective. And with that, we say love should not destroy. Love vitalizes one, right? And beyond sexual love, we have to say love is love. There are, of course, many different types of love, such as, I don't know, maternal love, filial love, the love of a child to his or her parents, fraternal love, and by fraternal, I don't always mean your siblings, but loving all those who are around you, right? Love your extended family, spiritual family, all of those who accompany you in this journey. So let's think about it. Started with sexual love, went to other types of loves. I'm going to go back to sexual love. Sexual love usually involves passion, right? And passion is ignited by all those hormones in your libido. And passion, only passion without love, it feel like maybe a self-consuming fire, right? And that fire goes bright and it burns itself. Real love, on the other hand, is ignited and it's long lasting. It doesn't consume you or consume itself. So, teenagers out there, be prepared for the many passions that will, quote unquote, explode. Many, one, two, three, 100, I don't know, right? They will explode in your adolescence. It's okay, but be aware that love will come just a few times. So, it is sad for me to say that many unions will most likely fail once the conditions that made it possible are no longer there, right? If I quote unquote fall in love, and passionately so, because you're wealthy, beautiful, or whatever, once those conditions are not there, it fizzles out. So be prepared to be open to the guidance of others. And yeah, I'm going to say be open to your parents or to those who play an educational role in your life, because they're there to help you, and because as you're equally open to experimentation this time, you should be consider be opening to the guidance of others. So I wish you all a loving life fulfilled with many tender friends. But let's keep moving. We have a few more minutes to talk today, and I'm going to talk to you about dating. Yes, dating, because falling in love is one thing, but dating is a whole different ball of wax, right? And the funny thing is, we don't have a class on dating, do we? I trying to remember a series. It's a Netflix docudrama about neuroatypical individuals of all ages, and how if dating is hard for typical neurotypical, it is infinitely harder for if you are atypical, and I'm talking about those in the autistic spectrum. So the series about people coming and filming, right, documenting their dating process, but also teaching them, giving lessons, cues. If somebody says that, you say something else. When you sit at a table, so it's really cute. But anyways, we don't. I never did. No one ever told me that for you to date Marcia, those are the rules: one, two, three, four, five. But anyways, we don't, and we have to think. But we're not prepared. We don't get lessons, but we do date. Why? Because sexual attraction is so powerful during our adolescence that we are just pushed, no matter how introverted or extroverted you are, we are pushed to express our need for affection or exchanging affection. And the funny thing is that it feels like in the blink of an eye, right? In the blink of an eye, a minute ago I was a young child and I had all my buddies, my friends, and my family. My father was my hero, so on and so forth. And boom, we just look out and come back, and everything, all my interest, all my relationships, everything disappear and is replaced by this different type of motivations, including a deep need for those interpersonal relationships. I believe you may agree with me, but think about it. It's when we look at each other at that time, and I'm thinking of Romeo and Juliet, perhaps. You're young and you look at each other and you knew that person, and like all of a sudden you start to see those logical transformations in the other. Yeah, and we also seen ourselves. So there's restlessness, there's embarrassment sometimes, and yet we are urged. There's the thing that urges us to experiment, and so dating begins. What could go wrong? Oh, a bunch of things, but let's pick up a couple of things. Um, Sex when there's no commitment to be emotionally engaged. That's one thing that could go wrong. With that, seeing the other as an object, right? So sex, intercourse, you have it, and once it's done, you discard that person. That person is no longer relevant. And with that, a promiscuity. You just go into a string of uncommitted types of sexual encounters to during your dating time, right? That's I believe that what could go wrong. That's one alternative. But the other, which I could call it maybe what could go right, is perhaps discovering in the other during dating deeply rooted interest in the other, right? That you are fascinating, that you want to get closer, that you want to be emotionally engaged, that you want to perhaps listen and engage in rich conversation, rich in the content of emotionally rich but also intellectual rich for you. You may find an outlet for affection, for caring the other, for tenderness. Oh, and one that you should never forget, which is just an opportunity to encounter what is different, right? And as such, an exercise in diversity of interest or psychological behaviors, cultural expression, so on and so forth. So when we understand that attraction is nothing more than a sexual stimulus, yes, nothing more, right? No further meaning beyond a chemical interaction there or stimulation. We see that beyond that initial attraction, if there's nothing done with it, if there is no interest in the other, there's really nothing to gain beyond the sexual activity itself, the sexual release. Right? So think about it. You're dating somebody, and dating moves toward a sexual relationship without that necessary psychological maturity or even emotional bonds that ties the two people. Um, it leads probably to frustration, right? It may lead to perhaps inappropriate practices that can actually result in sexual pathologies if you think about it as it goes to extreme. Let's not forget now. sex is a beautiful, divine aspect of our lives. Yes, it is. So dating is a type of preparation for teenagers to learn about themselves, because in that rich interaction, as you access the other, you also access yourself, right? As the other becomes vulnerable, you too become more vulnerable, and it opens up the richness of who you are as a person. And so think perhaps that these new types of relationships, affection is also, it's just life, is also coupled with perhaps conflicts, right? And I can think in my mind's eye, if you ever study drama, right? Every drama, romantic drama, it starts with everything's rosy and beautiful, and there's this crescendo until boom, there is a conflict. And once the conflict is resolved, there is a quote unquote happy ending. And that is just that. We need to be vulnerable, but we need to be aware that the most likely there will be difficulties. You're not one person, and even if you're one person, a relationship with yourself, it's full of conflicts. Can you imagine to have with somebody else that's going through the same things that you're going through? And if that relationship is a very healthy one that allows for its resolution, a healthy resolution, I put, it's all good. It's enriching. It's actually pushing the boundaries of the relationship itself. But if not, right, then it's an environment that can fester, and by that I mean is creation of a space, a room for lies, for pretense, for unrealistic expectations of the other. And those unrealistic expectations may even be regarding your own appearance and all sorts of forged, right? And by forged, I mean pretense behaviors. So I close my discussion here about dating, saying that dating fills a need, right, in all of our lives that should lead to psychological renovation, to comfort, but it should be carried with care. I hope it makes sense to you. So let's just keep moving on. And we're here on the ninth chapter of the book, where we talk a little bit about expectations. Yes. And what type of expectations am I talking about? Well, what I expect as a teenager from society and what society may expect from me. And I just think about it as this book is pushing me to think a lot about me as a teenager. But in this case, I'm thinking about when my kids were teenagers themselves, and it was funny because you become a mother and you have this young beings in this case, and they become to be somebody that you learn to care and to say stimulate and discipline, etc. And poof, with the blink of an eye again, they become what it feels like a completely different people. And nobody came to introduce us, right? They were like the rest of us, going through this phase of experimentation with their own physiological, psychological bodies in a ways they have never done before. And that's what it is. We become not the monster, as I mentioned last week, the girl that would become a monster in that cartoon every time something triggered, but they become somebody they're not used to it. It's a response mechanism are different. Things that used to be okay become a source of irritability, so on and so forth. So In addition to all of it, as teenagers, there's this crisis of identity of sorts, right? And it happens directly related to all of those hormones raging inside of us. And I'm just going to talk about two types of hormones. The one from the hypophysis or the pituitary glands, they secrete hormones that will actually lead to profound alterations in your physical organizations. And we're talking about testosterone, estrogen, et cetera, right? On the other hand, we also have growth hormones secreted by thyroid, for example, during this time that will lead to things like gain, very rapid gain in growth, in height, etc., but also in weight. So with that, we have to think that all of it is happening at the same time, where physical, sexual, psychological, and cognitive changes at the same time. And as such, all of a sudden, you are somebody else, and without preparation by any means, and you feel like society is not there to understand you or help assist you while you're going through those changes. And by society, I mean your family structure, I mean your school, your friends, your church, if you go to church. Nothing of the framework that you had before react to you. Mostly, I'm talking about in general terms here, of course. They don't come to you in assistance to the conflicts that you're going through yourself. um, Cognitively speaking, as I said, psychologically, emotionally, all of the turmoil and changes that are happening at the same time, and there's no one out there that really is prepared to uh, to understand you. But that's your expectation. It should be, actually. I did not choose to do this. It's just happening to my body, to my mind, to my emotions. Be there to understand me. So, um, being not prepared or inadequately prepared for all that is going through is the reason for many difficult results, harmful or in some cases actually fatal. Think Romeo and Juliet, right? And the other component of that is, as we can say, is the fact that advances in technology, and I alluded to that before, but advances in technology and our access to information, our access to knowledge is so great now that it is leading to a premature sense of stimulation in this age group, especially girls. So, beyond the expectations that society, from one end to the other, that society should understand the conflicts that each person, each teenager out there is going through. There's something else, which is the disruptive forces in place resulting from the clash between generations. And we talk here about the clash between me and my parents, for example, their way of thinking, behaving, conducting, selecting things, and the clash is there, and I love that it's there. As an adult now, no longer a teenager, I love that it's there, because without it, what we would have, status quo. The clash is actually disruptive in nature, but leads to progress. So, historically speaking, it's when we see renewal, right? We also see, unfortunately, aggression and even violence. And I'm afraid to say, when things happen special to girls, my mind specifically goes to certain areas of the globe where girls or women are disadvantaged in many ways, including access to education, right? So think about it. Clash. There is a misunderstanding. You want to be respected and you're not. You want to be understood and you're not, and you don't understand or respect either. There is that disruptive nature, and at some point, yes, adolescence is a finite time. It should be finite. At some point, we come to terms with our own hormones in getting achieving a sense of balance, and we're no longer so crazy, and we're there, and we start to look at society, and we look at life, and we look at our parents, we look at our social institutions, our churches, our schools, our friends with different eyes. We start to reevaluate all of the events in the spirit of time, and we somehow become able to reprogram who we are to a no a new norm, right? And that's the new norm becomes your new cultural environment, your ecosystem, if you will, all changed post teenage years. Why? Well, because there are many other teenagers there, so that's why we talk about generational clashes. It's not just you. So maturity and reason come to a different sense or understanding or perspective what society is. And society, in turn, have a wrong, misguided expectation that now that you're no longer a teenager, adult, conform. And that's not the case. The former teens are now the agents of change to a new society. Ha! Isn't it amazing? So, generational conflicts that are unavoidable bring space, shed light to new ideas, new needs, the establishment of new channels of communication, channels for understanding, channels or platforms for cooperation, and all of these leading to a new integration, a new construction of a new reality. And you, my dear, you're responsible for that. I love it. So let's go ahead and finish our time together today with a discussion of violence. And it's really the slide here is very harsh, but we just wanted to talk about the expectations or the stereotypes of adolescence, right? And as we close our discussion, we just have to say that adolescence, regardless, is a very difficult stage of our human development. And there are many, many, many challenges, many, many hurdles to you, teenager, as well as to you, caretaker, to you, a parent and educator, or anyone who's taking care of a teenager. And so, as I close, I wanted to say it's really cute because Aristotle, and if you don't know Aristotle, he is a Greek philosopher that lived about 300 years before Jesus Christ. So 2,300 years ago, he said, Mr. Aristotle, adolescents are impetuous, short tempered, and irritable. Did he say anything that is not true? No, Aristotle, you're right on. Plato, before Aristotle, and it's just funny, he said, he advised to all, do you adolescent, you teenager, do not drink alcoholic beverage before the age of 18. And I'm from I was born in Brazil, but I lived most of my life in the US. So speaking to you from the US, and I know 21 is the age for you to be able to buy and consume alcoholic beverage. Plato said, do not do this before you're 18 because you do not want to put fire onto fire. I love it. Well, about 1700s, 17th century actually, maybe 2000 years after Aristotle, right? There's an account of a priest, and this is my final, but funny enough example of how people classified those difficult years of an adolescent. So this priest said that youth was much like a new ship that is christened and sent into the ocean waters without either a rudder or a pilot to steer it. So you can tell it can go anywhere. So with those concepts that are very, very cool to think about, especially because of the age that how long ago they were said, but they really may bring a sense of violence if you think of them as censorship, right? Or intolerance or unacceptance. So Joanna brings to us the notion, right, that if we as adolescents are going through physical changes, those changes are an echo of our psychological changes, and that result from a crisis of identity, or results into a crisis of identity. And she reminds us, as I was closing, that this transitional period is really all about finding yourself, right? You go through, I don't know who I am, but just because you don't know who you are, you seek to find who you are, your own identity. And she says it's all about also uncovering your role in this lifetime. If we don't, and this is really important, if we avoid, if we try to use escape mechanism not to deal with our own crisis of identity, you will miss a very, very, very important step in your growth. So, as you are finding and seeking to deal with that crisis of identity, you understand and uncover your role in this lifetime. And it reflects really on how you conduct yourself, how you choose to be who you are. And she puts on another and final wrinkle to this discussion, which is the perspective of an immortal soul. And as that, very interesting. This period is super, super important because reincarnation is for the spirit an opportunity for atonement. Yes, atonement as well. It is an opportunity for training us, immortal spirits, for our greater achievement and challenge that we have. So, think about it. If I am an immortal spirit and I'm going through this crisis of an identity and I'm seeking who I am, I'm also getting open to awakened spirit, and with that awakened spirits are also old wounds, old vices, old qualities, all of it's coming up to bring to you who you truly are. And she said that those that we start to see in yourself are really our tendencies, right? My tendency to be an addict is something that I bring with me. My tendency to be a patient person also demonstrates something that I brought with me. So let's think about it. If we are here to grow, but also to atone our past lives, this is the time for us to seek perhaps restraint, perhaps guidance as I choose my path beyond current period. Because this period, as we said many, many times today, is a period of many, many simultaneous physiological developments. And it's because of it, this moment of I'm okay, I'm not okay with myself. So it is a strange process, and it pushes us to rediscover who you are, your own identity, and it's a period that allows you for readjustments of not only who you are, who you've been, but also who you want to be. So as we reach the final moment, a final minute of our time together, just think about it. As we reach a sense of harmony between the physical, psychological areas, right? We also grow free from all, and this is really important, all of our inner violence that is inside of us, that we bring with us. And we are ready to face what lies beyond us. So I close today with a deep sense of gratitude for your time, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much and so long.